Hi, Algebra 1. We don't really have a note page, but I'm going to go to the homework page that I will give you today and work out a couple problems just to get us thinking about a few things, but we're going to be on page 50. Looking at problem number 1, we'll work this one out together. So I have 4x minus 3, 5x minus 1. Remember, this is the double distribute that we've been doing, so we're just kind of circling back to it. So I'm going to multiply those. That gives me 20x squared because those are both to the first power. Minus 4x minus 15x plus 3. And then those are like terms. This is not a like term because it's x squared, okay? So minus 19x plus 3. And that's your answer. Okay, yes, I realize we're going backwards, but we want to just make sure we factor those out. And we're going to look at number 4, and this is still from the last chapter, just kind of keeping us warm that we remember how to do these things. Remember, we're just going to distribute over. So 3 times 2 is 6. Add the exponents when you're multiplying the bases, so that's to the 8th. And then minus 3 times 5 is 15, and then the x to the 5th comes along. So remember, if you have any questions about any of these, please ask me, and I'm happy to help you. And let's go down to number 7. This is what we had been doing this past week. We worked on. Remember, if there's a one out there, if there's nothing out there, multiply those together, and that gives me negative 40. When I get a negative number when multiplying two numbers together, that means one of them had to be positive, one of them had to be negative. Okay, so let's think about I want the factors of 40, the two numbers that we multiply together, to be 40, but when we add them together, we get negative 3. Remember, one of them's positive and one of them's negative. Well, we could probably eliminate 1 and 40 because we know that 1 and 40 are not going to somehow add up to negative 3. We could probably get rid of 2 and 20 because they're not going to add up to that. 3 won't work. Maybe let's take a look. 4 and 10. Would 4 and 10 work? Are they 3 apart? Nope, they're not going to work. What about 5 and 8? 5 and 8, I think, would work. Let's see. Let's think about 5 and 8. Let's not forget we have to put x's in. Which one would have to be negative if I were to add these together to give me a negative 3? Right, a negative 8. So I'm going to have positive 5x and negative 8x. I'm going to plug into the center. So the ends come down. And then I'm going to plug those. These get plugged in any order I want. Just make sure you keep the signs consistent, okay? So what do I have in common between those two? That would be x. Factor an x out, and you're left with x plus 5. Remember, the very middle sign comes down, so that means I'm going to be factoring out a negative. What number does 8 and 40 have in common? Remember, I'm trying to make it look like x plus 5. Yeah, you can factor an 8 out of both. So negative 8 factored out of negative 8x is just going to be x. Negative 8 factored out of negative 40 is positive 5. Factor those out. Those are common. And then here's the rest of our answer. Now let's take a look at number 8. Number 8 is just going to look like this. It doesn't look like any that we've been dealing with. We only have 2 terms. So first off, do we have a greatest common factor? Greatest common factor. We will refer to this often as GCF. That's the acronym for greatest common factor. So you take a look. What do I have in common between? It appears I have an x between them. And if I factor an x out of x squared, I'm left with that. If I factor an x out of negative 3x, I'm left with this. That's my answer. It's all done. Problem number 9. And remember, write these right down on your sheet, your homework sheet. That's totally fine. Okay, so now we have this one. So remember the other day I had you list the thing. And the very first step was get rid of a greatest common factor first. This is actually the third. So I'm not going to be able to factor this like how we just been doing it, so we have to do something first. What do I have in common between all 3 of these terms? Yeah, they all have an x. So if I factor an x out, then I'm going to be left with x squared because there was xxx here. This is going to be minus 8x, and this is going to be positive 16. Now, how I like to do this is this was a greatest common factor. This is part of the answer. So I'm going to bring this, and I'm just going to bring it all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm going to put my parentheses. Okay? I don't know what my answer is quite yet, but I have to go ahead and factor this out, like I've been doing. So we can either try and do it on the side or squeeze it in there. So I'm just going to come over here and say, let's do this the way we've been doing it. All right, so I have to put a 1 out front, multiply those together, so that's positive 16. In order to get a positive number, the numbers have to be either both positive positive or negative negative. In this case, they're both going to be negative negative because I have a negative sign here. And think about the factors of 16. 1 and 16, they're not going to be able to add up to negative 8. 2 and 8, they're not going to be able to add up to negative 8. But negative 4 and negative 4, negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Negative 4 added to negative 4 is going to be negative 8. So this is the one we're going to use. We're going to squeeze it in, x squared plus 16. And then I'm going to put minus 4x and minus 4x. Notice I can factor an x out, so that's going to give me x minus 4. Middle sign comes down, so I'm factoring negative out of both. That's going to be a negative 4, and then an x minus 4. And then those are the same, great, so x minus 4 is there. And then what do I have left? I have x minus 4. Oh, so this whole thing's the answer. So we had a greatest common factor that came out first. Once I did that, I just brought it to the bottom. And then I took care of what was inside to factor out. Okay, not all of these that we work out today will have a greatest common factor. I mean, you just have to double check to see if I could take a number or a letter out. So let's take a look at number 12. Number 12, we have 2x squared plus 14x plus 12. So this looks like one we should be able to factor out. But take a look. What can I divide each of these by which would factor something out? Yeah, you can take a 2 out. If you take a 2 out, I'm left with x squared. If I take a 2 out of 14x, I'm left with 7x. Take a 2 out of 12, and I get 6. Now, you can always double check to make sure this is right. Is 2 times x squared 2x squared? Yes. Is 2 times 7x 14x? Yes. Is 2 times 6 12? Yes. So this is a greatest common factor. So I'm going to bring that down, and then I'm going to have my parentheses, and then I'm going to go ahead and factor this out like I've been doing. So let's bring it over to the side, x squared plus 7x plus 6. Let's put a 1 out front, multiply those together. This is going to be a positive 6. Let's think about our signs. Everything's positive here, up here, so I'm thinking everything should be positive. And what are the factors? What two numbers multiply together to give me 6, but what those same numbers add together to give me 7? I think if you do 1 and 6, 1 plus 6 is 7. They're both going to be positive. So let's bring our ends down. So x squared plus 6. Let's squeeze that in the middle. Plus 1x plus 6x. And then let's go ahead and factor. I can factor an x out of both of those. Now it leaves me x plus 1. Middle sign comes down. I can factor a 6 out of both of those. And take a look. X plus 1 goes right there. What do I have left? X plus 6 goes there. We also have the greatest common factor. That's part of the answer. Okay. Now, there's one. I don't see one right off the bat. Actually, let's take a look at number 10. Number 10 looks like just a normal one we can factor. So we don't have a greatest common factor. So I'm going to put a 1 out front. Multiply those together, and I get negative 4. That means I have to have a positive and a negative. So the factors of 4 are 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Is there any way that any of those factors, when added together, would give me negative 10? The answer is no. Oops, I don't know why that happened, but I'll go with it. The answer is no. So once it won't factor, you just have to write the word prime. Prime means won't factor. Now don't go and just write down prime on everything because you can't factor it. Go ahead and try them. Make sure you try and get rid of the take the greatest common factor out. The greatest common factor could be a number that all the terms have in common. It could be a letter they all have in common. It also could be a letter and a number. So for today, let's make sure that page 50 and 51, all of them, you have plenty of time to work on it. Happy to help you on it. Have a nice day.